Much for attending this talk today that is organized by the Cambridge University Persian Society. We are delighted that Professor Pesaran has accepted our invitation to give a talk on Iran's economic challenges and opportunities. First, I would like to ask Ashkanas to come and introduce Professor Pesaran for a few minutes, and then we would ask Professor Pesaran to come and give his talk. Thank you for it. By the way, may I ask you to not forget to turn off your mobile phones to ensure that
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, I would like to thank Professor Pesaran for accepting our invitation, and it is truly an honor to have him this evening with us. Professor Pesaran is the professor in economics and the director of the Center in Applied Financial Economics at the University of Southern California. He is also a fellow of Trinity College and an emeritus professor of economics at the University of Cambridge, where he has been since 1979. Professor Pesaran was born in Shiraz, Iran. He received his first class honors BSc in economics from the University of Salford, and then he did his PhD in economics in the University of Cambridge. Prior to the Iranian Revolution, he was the head of the Economic Research Department at the Central Bank of Iran. Professor Pesaran's early work focused on the problem of model selection and hypothesis testing. Later, he started to work on the problem of aggregation in econometric modeling and analysis. Professor Pesaran is a fellow of the British Academy, the Econometric Society, and the Journal of Econometrics. He has more than 190 publications in leading scientific journals, and he has edited papers in areas of econometrics, empirical finance, and macroeconomics. As you all know, last year he was nominated for a Nobel Prize in economics. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Professor Pesaran.
Thank you so much for the invitation and the kind introduction. I will start this presentation. So actually, part of this presentation was done in Iran when I was there in January. So there's a lot of discussion about some of these issues there as well. Basically, what I'd like to do is to start off with an overview. Then I provide my theoretical framework for how you study Iranian economy. Then I fill the theoretical framework with some evidence and show you how Iranian economy are faring in relation to these fundamental relationships which we observe in most economies, and then discuss what are the challenges and the opportunities that Iran faces. So, most of you already know that Iranian economy, especially since the last 4 or 5 years, has been suffering what's known in economics as stagflation. And Iran the word is now in Farsi, rukud tawarrumi. It's very something which everybody uses now, which basically means situations where you have wars of both wars, you have high inflation and no growth. Usually, in most economic relationship, when the conditions are normal, when you activate the economy and you create a little bit of inflation, often it goes with growth. So that's why it's a serious problem that Iran faces. The industrialized economies, including UK, face the same problem. In 1970s, after the oil price rose by 3-4 times. And some of you may lived here or remember, or some of you have studied the history of this country and Western Europe, that during those times, 1973-74, there was even a 3-day, if you like, work week because of the fact there was not enough energy, which the price has gone up, and also production was low. So that's what the problem is. And then there are reasons for it that it happens. I'm going to expand on them, and then we can discuss how do we come out of this malaise, this problem, this difficulty. Now, let me give you some numbers. Inflation in Iran since the, if you like, revolution has been typically high. It's been rising up to 50% during Mr. Rafsanjani when there was a financial crisis that time. So we had 50% annual rate of inflation. Then inflation fell to 20, 10% sometimes, never gone below 10% per annum. All these numbers are per annum. And then during Mr. Ahmadinejad terms of office, especially the second term of office, inflation steadily keep rising. A lot of people think that some of this due to sanction. I'm going to talk about that later on and provide you evidence to what extent this is true. Because it's quite clear, as you see from the diagnostic of IMF and others, that obviously sanction played a role, but obviously mismanagement and corruption and other inefficiencies in the financial and monetary system also contributed to that. So we need to understand what are the relative importance of these factors. So what happened? Inflation reached 45% in the summer, just during the time of the election of the new president, Mr. Rouhani. But because of the both the better rational system of management and the better expectation, one of the key we know inflation and the way it operates is through expectation. If people expect inflation to rise, it tends to rise. If people expectation tend to fall, it has an effect. Not totally, but it has an effect. And there are good reasons for it. If you expect inflation is rising, you go and buy the goods now. Why do you wait? Because you got to higher prices. But the fact that you go and buy the goods now, you also create more demand than you would have. You basically create relative to the supply, and the suppliers may say, well, why do we supply at these conditions? You may import, and the import goods would then substitute domestic production, and therefore the inflation becomes very worse in those situations. So therefore, the inflation expectation is really important, anchoring the economy, so have a low inflation expectation. But when Mr. Rouhani came in, the policies of Ahmadinejad started to be reversed. There was also negotiation going to start with the West, which helped, normalize the climate. Inflation expectation fell, although at that time many people were always Iran. People asked me, discuss the newspaper. If you read, I gave a number of interviews with Persian and a lot of people believe this is going to continue 45 years, but I knew it's not going to. And it's actually quite interesting that the prediction made at that time, about 20% is exactly what happened. Inflation fell 20% in March, and it's actually, if I looked last night and the last month, rate of inflation relative to the previous year or a similar month is now gone up to 17%. So it's been back halved with the space of a year. It's possible that Iran could have its inflation below 5%, which is what is normal nowadays. 100 countries in the world, the inflation is below 5%. And most of the Iranian trading partners, the inflation is below 5%. So therefore, there is no reason why Iran should have a high inflation. So it's endemic with policies which have been enacted. And obviously, the hostile environment within which Iran operates contributes to that as well. So what happened to GDP? GDP growth in 2012-2013, for the first time since the revolution, the year of revolution was the only time that we had a large fall. Our GDP fell by 5.6%. It's quite a significant amount of fall for a country like Iran, which the population is still growing. So if you add the population growth to it, it means that per capita income fell by something like 7% in that year. Of course, the burden of this fall in output is not shared equally by everybody. Those people who have their own businesses, those people who have access to capital and banking sector, suffer less than those who are subject to these problems. So you can just see that social tension can create as a result of, and even the way the inflation affects people and the way the fall of output affects the people. So you have this is a very unusual scenario for Iran, but it has happened in other countries. Iran is not the only country which has suffered. So this is what the situation. I think it's a very nice press release. This was published by IMF in February 12. You can access it through internet. You can download it. And it's a very comprehensive, detailed document which IMF produced, which also matches with this analysis which I'm going to tell you about. So So what is I have decided to just quote a few of some extract from IMF press release, which was published in February. And basically, the diagnostic is similar, that Iran has been subject to large shocks. Economists talk about shocks, which basically means events. Bad shock, good shock. So basically, the bad shocks are obviously when you're sanctioned, is a bad shock, or financial sanctions is like a bad shock. A good shock is when you have oil and the price of oil rises for Iran. That's a good shock. So basically, but there is not only Iran has been through these shocks, always been subject to these events. Iran is actually more susceptible to shock than any other countries because, as I was trying to explain, we have very little shock absorber. Most economies have shock absorbers. We don't have that. We haven't developed the institution which allow you to develop those shock absorbers. So then, but we also have been subject to a number of other events, like the subsidy reform during Mr. Ahmadinejad. I'm going to talk about in more detail. The fact that there has been social welfare which has been building up, and there is not enough capacity to deliver all the needs that many factions of the society has. I'm going to talk about that as well. But it's also been mismanagement of the Iranian economy, which I'm going to explain what are the roots of mismanagement. And hopefully we can avoid it in the future. Usually it takes a generation, people forget that they repeat it, so hopefully we can avoid some of it. So this is what the IMF says here, and then it continues here also that then it comments that obviously Iran at a very important crossroad, and with the new president coming in, the new regime coming in, there is an opportunity to reverse some of these problems of mismanagement. And the prognosis was at the time, and it still is, there is kind of what I call cautious optimism about that the problems can be solved. Although you have to be very careful that there are so many factors at the stake, so it's not easy to predict these outcomes. Okay. So now, what I'm going to talk about now, therefore, to ask myself, how do we answer the question that a lot of people pose, that to what extent is the effect of sanctions on the Iranian economy, and to what extent is mismanagement? What are the relative weights of these two important factors? I use the word mismanagement in a broad sense. I don't mean just mismanagement by the government, it could be mismanagement of the financial sector. It could be mismanagement of the semi-government agencies, which operates quite significantly in Iran. Now, but before we can understand the relative roles of these different factors, we need to look at what are the causes of the inflation and the financial crisis, which haven't been often associated with inflation. I'm going to show you some numbers. I noticed that obviously some of you don't have economics background, but I will try to explain in a simple language, which I think we will follow. But if there is any question, then please stop me now, or maybe later to expand on some of these issues. I'm afraid I can't, without using my own knowledge, to try to convey to you why I think what are the causes of these problems and how can we resolve them. Okay, so the first thing I'm going to explain to you that the problem of inflation and financial and the foreign currency crisis, a lot of it is during the time of both Mr. Rafsanjani and most importantly during Mr. Ahmadinejad reign, which was 8 years, was what is best called populist agenda. Let me explain what the populist agenda is.